Hello there, my name is Martin Henley. This is the Effective Marketing YouTube channel, and if you've spent a second here, you will know that I'm on a mission to give you everything you need to be successful in your business. So not only am I here giving you everything I could possibly give you to be successful in your business, I'm also pulling in anyone I can find who has experience relevant to you being successful in your business. And that's what's going on today. So today's guest has sales experience going back to 1997 when he was a business and sales expert with Toshiba Business Solutions. Since then, he has founded and led a number of companies, including his current venture, S Marshall LLC. He offers business strategy, life coaching, personal and corporate training. He is a business strategist, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of 7 books. He is described by Yahoo Finance as a black belt in scaling businesses to multi-million dollars. He is the breaking fear guy. Today's guest is S Marshall. Good morning, S Marshall.
Good morning.
How are you, brother?
Good. Do you know why I put the S in S Marshall?
No,
Because
I'm interested to know why.
The Tim Marshall is an expert in beetle dung. So I didn't want to be called the expert in beetle poop. So I had to put the S in there to separate myself from that.
Okay, super cool. But how famous is this beetle dung guy that people are going to confuse you with this guy?
It only took a couple questions, and I was like, let me put the S in there fast.
Okay, cool. I've got a bit of a thing going on. I don't know. I think this is going on for a few people because I've been started putting it on my Facebook. But some academic site has somehow got hold of my email address, and they keep firing me emails saying, "Did you write this book?" And one of them was something like a lower digestive tract blockage or something. And it's like, no, I didn't. And there are a few Martin Henleys running around. There's one who's a barrister, I think, in the UK. And there is someone who writes educational books in the States where you are. But yeah, sometimes I call myself Martin F. Henley, and I tell people that F stands for effing.
There you go.
So there you go. I mean, it's a very rare occasion that I tell people it stands for that. It's just like if they ask, I say, that's what it stands for. Okay, so we're going to have the conversation. But you've got some experience that I'm interested in a little bit, which is this going all the way back to 97, 25 years ago, man, when you were a business and sales expert with Toshiba Business Solutions. Because there was something that was going on at that time where these business solution companies, Toshiba, Canon, they really were investing in understanding this sales and marketing thing. And they got really, really good at it, like the copier type companies. Was that your experience of being involved in that? Or was it a different thing?
You know what? It was a different thing.
Okay.
It was, yeah. I mean, just to give you a background, I had a 7th grade education at the age of 20. So, one of the biggest reasons why is because I was kind of stuck and lost in potential. I didn't think I was good enough. I had social phobia. It was just a mess. And as my friends went off to college, I started to realize that I got 2 choices. Either pick up a shovel, and I'm going to dig ditches for the rest of my life, or I need to turn my life around. And I found a tape in my parents' garage called The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale, and it said you become what you think about. And I listened to that tape over and over and over again, and then I realized I became what I feared. And at that very moment, as my dad said, I just got up one day. So I had to make up all the years of what I didn't learn in middle school and high school. And then I had to work hard enough just to get a college credit. So I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in business in 5 years. So I made up about 6 years plus 4, so I cut it in half. So that really put me on the projection of doing every single thing possible, sacrificing my time to achieve what I thought was not possible. And then I taught other people how to do it too, as far as education. And then going out of college, technology, and you're bringing up Canon and, the different manufacturers for copiers. I mean, it was the only company that would hire me. So I had no idea what I was getting involved with. And I went away to this training class where they send all the junior reps around the country to go. And, you try to do your demos and presentations and widgets and all that stuff. And I finished at the very bottom, least likely to succeed. And then I went back to my office, which is in Florida, and I picked up the phone and I started to call customers based off this script. So I read off this script that it was given to me by my manager, and he's like, Tim, just read the script to the customer. Well, I read the script to the customer and they'd snore and hang up, and it was just ugly. And at that same time, I was also dealing with panic attacks because I took on so much to get my college degree that my system literally started to shut down my last semester. I was in such fear, once again, that I wasn't going to graduate because I piled on so many classes that I took that into the business world as well. So I was battling two things. Number one is, how do you create messaging in a way where you're going to get a potential customer on the phone? Because there was no customers given to me. I just got a cross-reference guide or, thousands of customers to call with no information whatsoever except for a phone number. So to make a long story short, I just started making 200 phone calls a day. And then I learned how to build relationships with strangers fast. So I would say certain things like, well, I'll call somebody up because I got rid of the script. And I would say, listen, I made over 150 calls a day. I know you're going to reject me. So why don't you just hang up right now? And then I would create this kind of, just be yourself, sell. That's which is one of my books, Be Yourself, Sell Anything. I just became my own self. I stretched it. And then 6 months into my job, I got a back in the day, it was a fax. And my office administrator came up to me and she goes, Tim, look at this communication, look at this fax. And what happened is that when I left the training class with all the junior reps around the country, they had a sales contest to see who was going to sell the most in 6 months. And I just forgot about it. I never even thought in a million years I'd even qualify for anything. And on the fax, it said, Tim, you won the sales contest. And not only that, but you broke the company record. From that point on, I became the number one account manager for Toshiba every single year for 10 straight years. No matter if there's hurricanes, no matter if there's holidays, no matter whatever, I never had a bad month. I crushed it. But it was based on building relationships with strangers. It was based on humility. It was based on storytelling, empathy, problem, and solution. So that was the beginning part of my sales career.
Okay. It's interesting to me because I don't know how it was where you grew up, but it strikes me that education doesn't do a particularly good job, I don't think, for anyone, really. It doesn't turn out great employees, which is probably what it should be doing for like the economy. And what it should be doing for the individual is turning out like well-rounded, skilled, adaptable, people who can have really good careers. I don't think it does either of those two things. But it seems to me that it really doesn't do anything for us, salespeople, because I was the Larry kid in the class. I was the kid that was getting everyone's attention. I was the kid that was jumping around. I was the kid that wasn't particularly engaged with what was going on, but really good at engaging everyone in something else. Disruptive is probably the word. Now, what nobody told me is that these are the skills of a salesperson. like you say, crashing into people's lives and getting their attention, this is what you have to do if you're going to have a career in sales, because where you start, like you say, is with a telephone directory, and you have to crash into these people's lives and make a difference. So it's interesting to me like that. It seems to me that salespeople, I think, are largely born, and education doesn't really serve us. To the point where I don't know how it is in the States, but 100%. Nobody goes into sales in the UK unless they've got absolutely no idea what it is that they want to do, and they end up there completely by accident. So I don't know if that's a similar experience. I don't know how the attitudes are towards those things in the States.
Yeah, I mean, I would say you're right for the most part. I think most people go into outside sales not knowing what they're going to do, not having a clue. I would say, because I speak at universities and I've done that for a number of years. But the one thing I would say when it comes to school is, for me at least personally, and I know a lot of people that I've worked with, it gives you that discipline. Once you start putting that effort in to problem solving, right? So if I went from beginning math into tutoring and quantitative methods, that allowed me to literally do math in my head when I got in front of a customer. Sometimes, I used my calculator for a number of years, and then I got rid of my calculator because it gave me the ability to problem solve. Now, did most of those classes transition over into a sales career as far as, what I learned? No, not at all. But it did give me, once again, the discipline to start something and finish it. And then, it propelled me into leveraging that in the sales career. And I think you make a great point is, what you were saying, like what you did in class, being a little bit different, being a little bit disruptive. I truly believe in that, as long as, somebody's doing the next best thing, the next right thing, there's no reason why you have to live in like this poster child of, you have to say this exact way, and here's exactly what you have to say to every single customer, and you got to put some personality into it. And that's how you create the relationships with the strangers, because more people want to do business with normal people. And normal people, I mean people that are real. I leveraged that in sales. I mean, even building a company when the market crashed in 2008, banks weren't lending money. They were all laughing at me, thought I was absolutely crazy. I had 3 small kids. That was terrifying. But I utilized, once again, how to create relationships with strangers. And also, I learned certain formulas about, I'm getting off track a little bit on how to build a business. But it's the same model. It's the same model. And that's, as far as teaching salespeople, I teach them how to just be themselves, be real. So,
and that is actually a rare thing, because what I've done, so the way my career went is I was in sales for 10 years and then I started a marketing company is the way it worked. And of course I kept on selling. So I'm a salesperson, 100% I'm a salesperson. But I've always done relationship selling, like right from my very first sales job. My mission was always to be the friend of the person that I was pitching, because I think the role of a salesperson is to be like a trusted, like to be the specialist mate who provides this thing. So if they want this thing, they'll come to me and I'll know better than they do about it, and I'll provide them with the very best thing. That's always been my approach. I've always done like a relationship sell. People aren't themselves. They really aren't themselves in sales. They really, I don't know what people think. I don't know, because so many salespeople fail, but so few salespeople are actually just in the world, in the game. Do you know what I mean? Putting their personality and their themselves in the game. And I think that's what it actually takes, because I had a, for instance, today, was it today? It might have been yesterday. It wasn't very memorable. I've put on about 15 kgs. That's a lot of pounds in the last, since I gave up smoking. So I'm looking for kind of like a accountability person to speak to me every week and say, look, did you behave yourself? Have you had the result, etc., etc. I've spoken to 2 of these guys. They've all bought this stupid program where they have to take you through this conversation. Now, it might be because I'm a sales marketing guy that it screams program to me. Do you know what I mean? And so I tell this guy everything he could possibly need to know. I tell him, look, I'm looking to buy something today. But then he has, because he's not on script, so he has to go back. And he's like, so are you telling me this thing? I'm like, please, I've told you that thing 5 times. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, if if you're not prepared to engage, if you're not capable of engaging and listening more than anything, do you know what I mean? It's like, don't ask me a question that I've already given you the answer to. Do you know what I mean? It's not real. It doesn't happen in the real world, you know. So don't do it here when you're asking me to trust you with my money. Do you know what I mean? It seems really weird to me. Okay, so yes.
I understand, very much so. Good point.
Yeah.
Good. And I'm just going to say something on that too now. One of the things that, I've done over time is, when I do a speaking event or I do a keynote or whatever I do, I don't really use any notes. It's either I know my information or I don't. And to your point, if somebody's trying to go back and they're giving you a schedule of, well, if you're looking for an accountability person, they either know their information or they don't. But if they have to go back and try to put this thing together based off of, it's sort of like a robot list, then that's a problem. And I think that's where, a lot of the issues are in today's business world, sales world, is, people just don't know their information well enough. And usually it's not even about knowing your product or service per se. It's just having the ability to take somebody from point A to point B, if that's your given field, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
That's all it ever is. It's like they're in a situation, wherever they are on the journey, your job as a salesperson is just to take them to the next place. And maybe that's the place where they realize they don't want what you've got to offer. Or maybe that's the place where they get really excited about it and they have more of what you have to do. Whatever that is, like, that's your job, I think, as a salesperson, is just to take somebody another step on their journey and become their mate. Why not? Do you know what I mean? Like, I am the person, I'm your mate that knows the most about marketing. You know what I mean? If you want to have a conversation with somebody about marketing, you go to your mate who's the mate who knows the most about that. Interestingly, I attended a networking today. I attend a networking. John is also in this group, and they're the elite marketers. And there was a presentation, and this guy, genius, like in terms of data-driven, knowing what happens, when it happens, how it happens. Like he says, if you can do this thing, that thing, something, then you will have a 3-minute conversation. If you can have and you'll get a such and such conversion. I mean, genius, absolute genius. But then what the group was saying afterwards is, but the downfall of this is the salespeople, because you can't find salespeople who do a good enough job. And so the problem that you and I are talking about now is exacerbated because also marketing have this attitude of salespeople that nothing they do is ever kind of good enough. Businesses kind of have this attitude towards salespeople. Does this make sense?
Very much so. And here's why. Where it's like when I built my company, I sold it, and I signed up for a 3-year agreement to stay on. And they gave me another company that was in bankruptcy 3 months afterwards. And I'm like thinking to myself, I got one company I'm running. Now you're giving me a second one, which, hey, you know what? Why not? And what I know about building and scaling a company is you have to be able to teach salespeople in a way where they can understand analogies, storytelling, and you build up their skill set in a way where they can take what you're saying and actually run with it. But the problem is most companies don't have the management or the executives that can pass that message along. So what we're running into is a huge amount of impatience. So a lot of companies just don't have patience and or the understanding how to train salespeople or managers. The only reason why my company scaled and grew so fast, I mean, it was recognized by Inc. magazine as far as one of the fastest growing companies in the US in its category 4 years in a row, and I sold in less than 5. So I had to go from salesperson to teaching salespeople, that was a whole nother learning curve. But what I found out in the business world, especially because I ran a huge market, because they hired me as, I don't know, I took over, I don't know, $150 million worth of business, 200 million, whatever it is, my last year. And once again, I was assigned to a new group of people that have been with the company for a number of, 20 some years, 25 years. And you can pick out real quick, like, okay, these people have never really been trained before. So here's another opportunity for me to try to take on the hardest thing. But my point is, once again, it's the impatience of the businesses. It's the technology that's changing as well. And there's just a huge learning curve right now in the business world that most companies don't know how to transition over. It's like even if you're in digital marketing, I've had to learn digital marketing, not your side of it, but I've had to learn how to nail my message in less than 30 seconds. I've had to learn compelling taglines. I've had to learn how to get in front of the camera and communicate in a way where I'm going to be able to effectively pull somebody in that's not salesy, but at least I can go after the best message, and the best message is always going to win. And that's where, we'll go back to the salespeople and how they're not being trained, and, training this is just best message,
Yeah.
Story. That's all it is. It's like Finding Nemo.
Yeah.
Empathy, problem, solution. That's it.
100%. I'm 100% with you. And this is what I do mainly these days is I teach, but I see it's a pitch again. Do you know what I mean? It's like, can I pick these people up now where they are and take them to where I need them to be, which is better at digital marketing or sales or whatever it might be. So it's just another pitch, and I think, what are you saying? Empathy,
Problem, solution.
solution.
So
Yeah, 100%.
empathy is the heart. So you want to pull somebody in. Like I did a video on Saturday and I just said, listen, as a customer, do you ever feel like that you're being pulled or pushed in a different direction? Or maybe you're not getting what you really thought you were going to get. That's the empathy part of it. Then you identify the problem, and then, what's the solution? Solution is better communication skills, deliverables, don't overcharge. So it's empathy, problem, and solution. And I'll give you an example of, like what I do with the company as far as like storytelling. And if somebody gets it, they can literally change their life forever, or a business can grow at any pace and change everything. So for me, I've worked with contractors, I've worked with technology companies, all kinds of different companies, but really for the most part, my background has been in technology. But am I a technology expert? No. I became a sales expert and I understood about teaching, delegating, and inspecting. But the bottom line is, like when I took over one of the biggest markets for a tech company, after it was year number 4 after I sold, I started asking around to all the technology people, what is the worst situation that you've come across with a cyber attack? But he's like, well, why does he want to know that? And I kept asking. And this is years ago. And then finally somebody says, well, we had a customer that we went out to that was this cancer institute. And the IT person said he was fine. And we kept saying, well, why don't you just at least allow us to do an assessment? Because most companies have been cyber attacked and they don't know it. And the IT person was like, his arms were folded. No, 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 no. I know all my stuff. So 3 months later, he calls us up in a total panic. I've been cyber attacked, he says. So we go out there, we assess everything. Well, he was cyber attacked and his information was held for ransom. At that point, it was too late. His company worked for went out of business, and 3 other vendors went out of business too. So what does that have to do with sales? If I go into a customer or they're not going to let me in and I tell them that story, who's not going to allow us to do an assessment if I tell them that story? You know what? That's what so-and-so company said or this person said, and they were cyber attacked. And not only that, but their information was held for ransom and they went out of business. There's a good chance I'm going to be able to, or the salespeople are going to be able to get their foot in the door. And it's not even about selling cyber technology or managed network services. Because at the time, it's when I was in the tech business, we had other products. We had giant production systems. So maybe we get our foot in the door and it's based off of cyber technology, but then you sell them a $500,000 production system. And then you ask them, what other vendors you do business with? Because those other vendors, are prone to cyber attacks as well, especially if you're communicating with them. So you can take one customer and turn them into thousands if you get that formula. That's selling. That's how you build a company. And that story can be used for any type of product or service. It doesn't have to be cyber technology. It just you have to be able to identify, once again, empathy, problem, solution. And then you get inside and people know people.
100%. See, I don't think people know what sales is. I really don't. And this was demonstrated today. So we do this networking, we have this presentation, we go into like breakouts, there's 3 or 4 of us talking. And these marketing guys are like, salespeople are terrible at persuading people to buy stuff. I don't think that's a salesperson's job. I think a salesperson's job is more like what you're talking about now, which is getting them on side with the empathy, working out what their actual problems are, and then working with them to come up with a solution that's going to work for them best. And so I think it's dangerous if salespeople are foisting solutions on people. If you like, the more you have to persuade a customer, the less good a customer they are. Does that make sense to you?
Very much so.
It's like if you can find someone with a need, with a real need, and you can work with them to work out the solution that actually is going to work best for them, or is the most available to them, or is whatever. Now you've got a customer forever. Why would they not come back to you when they have their other issue? Or why, when they're at a barbecue or a dinner party and someone says, I've got this issue, would they not refer you? Do you know what I mean? It's like, you should speak to Tim about this cyber security solution. He actually understands what goes on, and he's a really cool guy. And those are the referrals I'm interested in, where people say, oh, you should speak to this person. But when they're like, and they're a really cool guy, I want to have relationships. I think we all want to have relationships, So I think businesses think that sales is about bullying people into buying things, and they expect their salespeople to go out and be able to bully people into buying things. I think that's how you break companies, personally.
I couldn't agree more. You're right on point. And I don't care whether it was 100 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 years ago, today, this very moment. Relationship selling is by far the most important thing that will never go away. So just like, building a company, which I've done from scratch, and I went from 1 customer to 6,000. How did I get, the other 5,999 customers? Yeah, I was prospecting and stuff, but it was word of mouth. It was relationships. If it was, let's just say if it was, I don't know, let's bring up churches, for example. If it was a Baptist church, Catholic church, Lutheran, whatever it is, I'd get all the churches in those markets. Or if it was a tech company, engineering company, they all knew each other. But when you start building those relationships up, guess what happens? They're going to want to help you.
Yeah.
And that's key. And it's like, and I took on a project about a year ago from some friends of mine that I knew when I originally started in the tech business. And now these friends, their kids are 20 some years old. And I spoke to one of them, years ago, and I said, you don't need to come work for me, but when you're ready to start a company, I'll help you. So I helped them start a company over 6 years ago. Now their kids are in their 20 some years old, and they asked me to train them. Now that was hard, because, you have to, 20 some year old kids in today's world with the technology and the cell phones and all the other stuff, their messaging is, it's not very good. Not everyone, but a lot of them. So, but the main thing I had to develop with them is just, once again, be real. Tell them you're brand new, that you just got out of this whole COVID thing. It's been a brick wall. You work for this company that's been in business. It's growing exponentially every single year. You have great products and great service. And if you could just please allow me the opportunity, I promise I won't waste your time. And if you use that brand new, in which they are, just be real. And once they really got that down, I can't tell you how, the numbers they've crushed it.
Yeah.
Crushed it. It's like, so, the robot needs to be fired. The salesperson needs to be fired, per se. It's all based on relationships.
It's all based on relationships. And this is why I went back to this 97 thing. Do you know what I mean? This Toshiba thing. Because it seems to me that the generations that are following us aren't getting that education that you and I got, where you're dialing 200 times a day and you're speaking to maybe 60 people a day, and that's how many thousand people a year. They don't know how to get themselves into a relationship. They don't know how to get themselves out of a situation if it gets a bit sticky. All of the stuff that we did, that's how I know about marketing, because marketing is about understanding markets. And I was talking to my market all day, every day. Or I was talking to the receptionist of the market, or I was talking to salespeople of the market. Do you know what I mean? I was in my market all day, every day, talking to people. And it just seems to me that, I don't know how it is stateside now, but it seems to me that kids now are kind of driving LinkedIn bots, or they're expecting to do something amazing with social media, or they might be throwing up websites. And I'm not saying there aren't geniuses amongst them, but what I am saying is that the salespeople and the sales situations that produced you and I'm not sure that they're available anymore.
I agree. And I think, to your point, there's such a thing as momentum.
Yeah.
And, I break it down into, the first three letters. You got M for movement, O for opportunity, and 3 for measurement. So if you're not, hitting those phones or making all those calls, or you're doing whatever it is, what do you communicate with, 5, 10, 20 people a day? What is that going to do? How do you really build up your skill set? How do you really build up the ability to communicate with people effectively? And that's where, to this day, I take the old school in me and I bring it to the game to this very day. And it never not works.
Yeah.
It always works.
See, this is what was going on when I started selling. I think I was maybe 3 or 4 years ahead of you. No, maybe it was about the same time. I think it was around 95. But we were hitting the phones 150 times a day. But people were doing that and getting up at the end of the day and walking away and not having any idea what they'd achieved or if they'd achieved anything. So they just walk away feeling like shit. Whereas I would always have a tally. This is the number of calls. This is the number of people I've got through to. This is the amount of people I've sent information to. This is the amount of people I'm scheduled for a call back. So at the end of every day, I could look at a piece of paper and say, that's what I did today. And then the next day you go in and you've got 30 warm calls before you have to cold call anyone, because these are people that you've had a conversation with already. And that was the momentum. That's what built the opportunity. But it was always, if you don't measure, how do you stay motivated? That would be my question. It's like, yeah. So we're going to have to find something to disagree about, man, because if there's no contention in this, it's not going to be very interesting for people.
Well, you nailed it, right? Measurement. What a crazy concept.
Isn't it?
And it's, how it is, digital marketing, right?
Yeah.
When I post stuff on LinkedIn, I look at, who's looking at my content, CEOs, salespeople, whatever it is. But I'm looking at it in a way where I measure, even to this moment, I measure in a different way.
Yeah.
But it's still a measurement. Because that way I learn, because I don't know. I have no idea. I do my, it's like I've written books. Are they good? I don't know. I don't know. But you know what? Surprisingly enough, like The Power of Breaking Fear is my first book. People love that book.
Yeah.
I was surprised.
Okay, cool. All right. So we should get to your specialist subject. We should get to the formula, because the formula kind of works. So you know that there are only, how far into this are we? 36 minutes. We're late. So there's only 5 questions. So your specialist subject is this breaking fear thing. You are the breaking fear guy. So the 5 questions are, firstly, how are you qualified to talk to us about breaking fear? Who do you work with? How do you add value to their lives? What is your recommendation for somebody who is looking to break fear, maybe, or whether that's in their teams or in themselves? And then the last question is, what should people read? The second to last question is, what should people read? And the 5th question is, who can you throw under the bus who might enjoy a conversation like this with me? So how are you qualified to talk about breaking fear? Maybe you need to explain to us what this breaking fear thing is first.
Okay. So I got a concept called fear first, goals second. So believe it or not, more people are held back more than anything else in sales, business, even relationships. I wrote a book called Relation Slips. What's the underlying thing? The number one thing in the world is fear. Fear sells more than anything else. Fear holds people back more than anything else. And if we go into rejection, what do people fear? Being rejected. What else? Fear of self-doubt, fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of not hitting your quota. I mean, I go on and on and on and on. So once you crack that code and you break that fear, and it doesn't mean you're going to be fearless for the rest of your life, because there's always going to be a different type of fear, like COVID and lockdowns and all kinds of different things. But if you harness that and learn how to build up your own coping skills by understanding that fear is normal. Everyone has fear. You should have fear. I saw somebody post something the other day that said, fear is an illness. Fear's not an illness. If fear was an illness, then we'd all be dead, because we wouldn't try to protect our family, ourselves, or whatever it may be. So it's a concept that you have to identify. If you're going to the office and you're not reaching out to people, if you're not making that extra contact, if you're, having more conversations and actually working, it's typically because there's fear behind your actions that's making you inactive. So, just like that story I gave you about cyber technology, that's fear. People buy off of fear or don't buy off of fear. People sell off of fear or don't sell off of fear. People start companies out of fear or don't start companies out of fear. So when I go into a company, no matter how big it is, or if it's startup, whatever it is, I go in with the concepts. And I can tell you, once again, it's not because I'm great. I just learned how to face my fears. And I've been terrified many times over in different ways, personally or professionally. But I've learned how to harness that it's never not worked, not just for me, but for any company. So that's where it's like I took over a company that was in bankruptcy. I turned around in 3 weeks because they were in fear. They were giving their products and services away at such a low price point. They're allowing the competition to absolutely slaughter them. Meanwhile, I'm like, you've been in business. The company's been in business for 40 years. That's leverage. That breaks down fear in a way where if you say that to the customer, guess what's going to happen? You build up your trust. Why do people don't? Why does the average person not pick up the phone, or why is the average person afraid to make a change? Because they're afraid it's going to be worse than what they have. So it's sort of like all the evidence I built up online. If you look up Tim S. Marshall, I got articles from all kinds of different newspapers, magazines, Inc. magazine. My books all have testimonials from some of the most successful people in the world. So when somebody looks to hire me or looks me up, they're not going to scratch their head and say, who is this guy? No, I put everything out in a certain way that I didn't even realize how much stuff was, if you Google my name, is under, until some of the kids I was coaching came up to me in one of the companies I was helped building. I'm like, Tim, have you Googled your name? I'm like, no. I looked it up and I'm like, holy cow. And then there's pictures of me speaking at, different NFL teams or whatever it may be. So why am I bringing this up in a tangent? Because all that evidence builds up trust. And that's the main thing of fear. How do you break through fear? You build up evidence and trust. You build up the capacity in a way where somebody is not afraid to make a change. Or you teach salespeople on how to communicate more effectively so they're not afraid to pick up that phone, or they're not afraid to send out that email, or they're not afraid to go out and see that one customer, or they're not afraid to ask for a referral. And there's different ways to ask for a referral. If I say to the customer, listen, we put this together in a certain way. I mean, this is a good package. And the only thing that we ask is that if you could refer us, as opposed to, can I have 3 referrals? There's a huge difference between that messaging. That's called breaking fear. Benchmarks, EBITDA, measurements, data. That's all breaking fear too, because now all of a sudden you're controlling what your numbers are. How do you effectively, incrementally increase the probabilities of succeeding faster and better? Well, you measure it. That breaks down fear as well. So, people get confused sometimes. Fear is just like, well, it's about jumping out of an airplane. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with increasing your probabilities to be more effective as a person and as a business person, to get what you want and give value back to that other person.
Okay. All right. So, sorry, my mind's racing now. I think there's 3 things that I'm kind of interested in here. I think there's 3. The first is about motivation. So when I'm teaching people, I'll tell people at A level, not the top level necessarily, not the bottom, A level, people are either positively or negatively motivated. So the negatively motivated are IT departments. They don't want anything to change. They don't want anything on their network. They don't want anything, They want less. They want less hassle, less risk, less excitement, less, yeah. And then there's positively motivated people like you and I, maybe, who are, we want more. Kudos, books, customers, money, nicer holidays, all of those kinds of things. So that's one aspect to it. Now, I say that and I don't tell them anything more. I just say, think about who you're selling to, think about what their motivation might be. But now you're talking to me and I'm thinking, fear is a much more powerful motivator. Like, if you can convince me that I might lose something, then it would probably be easier to motivate me to do something. Is that true?
100%. And great catch on that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't. Yes, you nailed it.
Right.
So
Okay.
I would say if you don't, with salespeople or businesses, if you don't do it, somebody else is. If you don't do it, somebody else is.
Yeah.
And,
Okay. So this
but
goes to the next place that I want to go to. So it's much easier to scare people into buying something, but I don't think that's the best way to sell somebody into buying something. What am I trying to say? I think you'll scare somebody into buying something once, but you won't necessarily win the customer for life. Does that make sense?
it does, and it depends on what the situation is. For me, like I said, I build up evidence and trust, and I'm big into the relationship aspect of it.
Yeah.
There's stories, that sell off of fear, right? So if you, just like you said, the IT people want less risk. Well, if I have a company that represents some of the best technology on the planet, I'm doing them a favor by discussing something that maybe they should be in fear of. Because if they don't act on it, that could be a massive problem. So it all depends on your customer, your vertical, your market, who your customer is. But yeah, you don't want to sit there and scare people all the time. I think it's a combination of, analyzing what your products or services are and what your potential customers want. And or maybe they don't even know that they need it. So once you create that need, you never know where it's going to go. But yeah, I think it's just from our standpoint, it's just depends on what tool you're going to bring out of that tool chest.
Yeah.
One tool, but one tool does not fix everything. You just need to have basic tools. But you want to have the evidence, and you want to have the backing. You want to have the potential customer not second guess and doubt. That they're not going to do anything. They don't want the risk, as you said. Who wants to spend more time worrying about something? You know, we have so much stuff on our plate right now. People want things to be a heck of a lot more simple.
Okay, good. So I think there's four things. I'm remembering the third thing. So I'll say this to you, and then maybe when you start speaking, I'll remember the fourth thing. The third thing is, I don't believe there's an Illuminati necessarily, but I think the machine that is running the world, or the way the machine kind of functions, has worked out that scared consumers or stressed consumers are better consumers. Like, I know if things aren't going great for me because I'll be Googling shit I don't need, and packages will start turning up at the house of stuff I don't need. Um, I don't enjoy that. And now, obviously, they've got us really scared. I mean, they just locked us up for 2 years and convinced us all that we were going to die. Now we are almost on some kind of nuclear event. They are surpassing themselves in the last 2 years in terms of stressing everybody out completely. Um, so there's that element. Um, there's that element. I've remembered the fourth thing. I'm going to write it down so you can speak to that, and I will.
I'm going to say, number one is this. Here's the biggest thing: is we've been dealing with pandemics and disease and all these different things since the beginning of time. So it's just that we just have, we polarize headlines. Fear, once again, fear sells. And based on the fact of technology and how things spread based on communication, it creates I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but politicians and everybody's like, well, this is on my shoulders now, and I need to make the safest decision or the safest choice. And we will not really putting themselves in everybody else's shoes. So, I mean, this is a whole nother topic, but yes, I mean, there's so much that's out there right now that literally has cornered people. And I've spoken to people all over the world, and I'm sure you have. And I mean, in every area, in every aspect, every walk of life, I've not heard one person that has not been affected in the last couple of years. And once once your coping skills, get worn down based on this fear factor, right? You got your COVID, now you got your nuclear threats, and what happens? We start to get more thinned out, and we're struggling to either pick up that remote control or get out of bed or take on something else in business or whatever it is. We're just compiling fear on top of fear on top of fear on top of fear. And once you have all that, you have somebody that is literally lost to potential. So that's why it's so important. Even in my book, I wrote, something on, when there's hurricanes, when 9/11 hit, whatever it may be, that's when I work the hardest. I mean, I always try to work as hard as I can to a certain degree, but I'm talking about running a company, because I would do the opposite. While everybody else is shelled, I'm going out there and front lining it inside, the streets. And, we got to be really careful about how much we do get affected by media and threats and all this stuff. And, because it has been going on, for years and years and years and years. It's just that, based on social media, based on, once again, polarization of news, we're so much absorbed into it, and I come from, I used to deliver the paper when I was a kid. So delivering the paper, you have certain people that want to read the front page or the financial section or the sports section, whatever it may be. But that was selective. Not everybody got the paper. Now you have everybody in the world that gets the paper based off of having a cell phone. So it's really about, what are you looking at? How much due diligence are you doing? What's the reality? What's the probabilities of certain things happening or not happening? And, just whatever you control, make a list out. I always tell people, make a list. What's the number one thing you have control over that you want to make a change with? Because that's your biggest goal. And the other list is what is worrying you the most that you have no control over. That's your biggest goal, to take it off the list, because you don't have any control over it. So if you have no control over it, why are you worried about it? So it's really important that we don't allow this thing called life, or, some of the bad people out in the world, to affect our daily lives, because they want that. Not everybody, but some do right now. And who I'm, we can go have a long conversation about that,
Yeah.
what's going on, and with, what's going on with, I'll just say it, Russia. That right there is someone that is trying to literally scare the, out of everybody right now. He's using fear as the biggest tactic to get what he wants. And he'll do anything until he gets it. So Is fear a big topic? Fear is only everything.
Yes. And the thing is, we don't have to get political, I don't think. I don't think this is necessarily political. I lived in Joburg for 5 years of my life, Johannesburg in South Africa. It was the second most dangerous city in the world. And what I realized only after I went back to the UK is that it was much more stressful living in the UK than it was living in Johannesburg. Because in Johannesburg, you know what the threat is. And if you get home at night and you haven't got a hole in your head, you've had a great day, Whereas you get back to the UK and you turn the TV on and they're saying, okay, be scared now of the environment, be scared of the economy, be scared of your kids, be scared of the war on drugs or the whatever, whatever, whatever. So it's this manufactured fear. So what you're saying is 100% right. You have to be really selective about what you take on in terms of influences, in terms of media and all those things, just in terms of well-being. Because, of course, now what we have to be scared of also is anxiety and depression and suicide and all of these horrible things. So it goes to a place where you don't even want to go to. My observation when I was running my marketing company was that everyone talks about fear of failure all the time. I don't think fear of failure is an issue that compares even with fear of success. Like, if you succeed, everything changes. Whereas if you just continue to fail, everything just stays the same, So I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I think, well, I mean, you brought up a good point let me go back to Johannesburg and how I can identify. I live between here and Sao Paulo for a
Okay.
period.
Yep.
So, and I've been in, some deep areas where you could be considered semi-violent, right? I get it.
Yeah.
But the togetherness, the family togetherness, the neighborhoods. I mean, there's places that, they didn't have a TV, whatever it is, right? The happiness, the anxiety wasn't as strong. I mean, to your point, what are we putting into our minds?
Yes.
Being in the US, it's the same thing over here. It's just, what's the temperature is 104 degrees. Then there's a wildfire. And then there's this. Then there's that. Then there's this. I mean, you just keep tacking it on. And then, not to get off into that other subject, yeah, you got a lot of other things that are creating health issues because of that. And that's the most dangerous thing, is all those numbers have really gone up a lot in the last couple of years. So, and then the fear of success, yeah, that's a double-edged sword, because the fear of success is usually based on the fact of fear of not being good enough. And when you fear not being good enough, then it's hard to be successful. And success is, it should be measured as as an individual, not as a comparison to. That's the biggest problem that people face, or they try to do. They look at, social media. Somebody's in front of a private jet, or, they're like, I'll never get here, or I'll never do this, or I'll never, you can go on forever about that. But success should be measured by the individual, his or her own morals, ethics, and what their goals are and what they want to try to achieve. That's it. And your best competitor is yourself. And when your best competitor is yourself, as long as it's healthy and you measure it like we talked about, then all of a sudden, you know what? It's not so negative.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And yeah, I think you just have to be, because it's a tsunami all day, every day. There is
Yeah.
something else to be scared of every day. And so I think you have to be taking really good care of yourself, because the world is not even the world has gone crazy. I imagine the world is no more or less crazy than it was 30 years ago. The way the world is being reported to us has gone crazy.
Bingo.
That's the situation. Yeah.
Bingo. And to your point, for me personally, I'm no spring chicken anymore. But I'm getting older. But I box. I train. I work out hard. I try to keep myself in physical, in good condition. It doesn't mean I eat the best, whatever it is. But I try to do the best I can to maintain this physical being, this body, so that I increase my probabilities of not being dragged down. If I hit a heavy bag, you know what? Maybe there's going to be less stress I have later that day. That's just me. My
Yes.
point is, it's good to have some sort of outlet that you've got to release some of this tension and anxiety because, United Kingdom and the US are pretty similar type of, you know, countries that have a lot of demands on being successful and achieving. And often we get controlled by people or circumstances that, we're kind of stuck with. And I've done videos on, you know, the smartest people being managed by the dumbest people. Don't fall into that. Be the smartest person, but create your own weather.
Yeah. Okay, so now the obvious question is like who do you work with? How do you add value to their lives? So this is how are you breaking fear?
So basically, what I do is I do Zoom events. I did a Zoom event on, breaking through personally and professionally. So something similar to what we just talked about. It could be banks, it could be, large technology companies. So, but what's happened more is that it's become more sympathetic. It's become more about communication in a way where it's okay to have certain fears, or it's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to talk about it. And so that's what I'm doing with a lot of different companies is I'm bringing it out and saying, hey, we have gone through a lot. Doesn't mean you stop working because, your actions create your mindset or your inactions do. But we're all, if we start discussing it without getting too much into drama about it, not being a victim, because at the end of the day, even though we were shut down for 2 years, we have better technology than we ever had in the history of the world. How do we utilize it? How do we leverage that? How do we understand that, there's certain things, like I said, you have control over, you don't have control over. So I help go in and I, help scale companies and build up their revenue and turn their whole situation around. It could be based on customer service. It could be based on sales, or it just could be based on, personal things that are holding companies back. And there's been a lot of issues with turnover. A lot of people have retired in the last couple of years early. You can see it with the airlines. So you've got a lot of different gaps out there right now. And I've had to, I study the gaps and the trends. And, companies like right now are looking, on average, 32% of the companies are hiring outside people, contingent workers, skill experts. So, and then you have the combination of what I do as well as I help bridge the gap of the companies that have now allowed the employees to work, X amount from their home and X amount from the office. How do you keep them motivated? How do you create those benchmarks? How do you create that measurement? How do you keep growing your company when you feel like maybe you don't have the same amount of control that you used to? Well, you can. You just have to make sure that you're communicating in a way where you're building people up, not tearing them down. You're taking somebody that has an open mind, and then you're teaching them the skill set, and you're teaching somebody that also has drive, which is the ability to be self-motivated to be the very best person they can be. And that's what I do. And that's where, I'll take somebody that has maybe less skills, but if they have an open mind, which is the ability to take on new information and the drive to absolutely pursue it, I'll take them over anybody else any other day because I know they're teachable.
Cool. You see, I think I'm not breaking fear. I'm doing something else. But what you're saying is 100% correct. I did a personal development thing once, and one of the exercises, the headline was "The universe applauds action." So there was something you had to do with some matches or something, and there were a whole load of people around you like clapping when you did it right, and they stopped clapping when you stopped doing it right, and then and you're hearing everyone else like is getting on with it, and they're getting more claps than you, and you're not. But the idea was that you just keep moving forwards, and I think that's really useful. I think we might be on a similar mission, but I think I'm going about it in a different way.
Mm.
You see, a little bit like the conversation we've had about sales, is I think if you are told, and we are told by society, that sales is for greedy, slimy, bullyish type people, and their job is then to persuade people to buy stuff that they don't want to buy, that's a scary proposition. Whereas for me, I tell people that sales is about making friends with people, understanding exactly what it is that they need, motivating them to do something slightly different, like because they're probably going to buy something from somewhere, so they might as well buy it from you. And then the last thing is about making the most of leads, which is like getting into people's lives and networking and finding out who they know who might also benefit from the same thing. And I think that's a much less scary proposition. Like if what do you think? Because what you think is more important.
I agree, 100%. I can tell you this from being on the speaking circuit, and I'm just going to say it the way it is. When I went out in public speaking, and I've toured with some people, I couldn't believe they would say or do anything to sell anybody anything. And I was so turned off by it that I was like, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. Because they're selling, I'm going to say it the way it is, they're almost selling like lies. And I can't. Listen,
that's a whole other industry with another reputation, like snake oil salesman.
Oh, I mean, some of the top speakers too. I'm like, and then I would hear the conversations behind the scenes, like, hey, it's basically like high-fiving each other because we just manipulated that audience.
Yes.
And I'm like, get me out of here. I need to go take a shower. So to your point, to my point, sales is a very, very good profession if you do it the right way. And it doesn't have to be looked at, in a very slimy way, or, you hear people say chase this or chase that. We don't have to chase anything. If you build value and you sell value, then guess what? You're doing a better job potentially than that other person or that other competitor that might not. So that's the key. But I agree 100%.
Yeah, not even might not. Categorically isn't. Like 98.7% of salespeople haven't got the first clue. Like sales, I'm with you 100%. Sales is the best job you could possibly have, in my opinion. Literally, if it's those things, making friends, helping people, supporting them to make the right buying decisions, making the most of the leads, there's no better job. I've been to like World Cup finals because I had a career in sales, so there is no better job. But at the same time, there is no worse job for the vast majority of people who are doing it because they're failing at it, because they're not getting what you and I are talking about right now, which is what sales is actually doing. The thing about fear, I think, is that it is so debilitating. Like people are frozen with fear,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's why what you're saying is the best thing is keep moving. Do you know what I mean? If you're moving, what do they say? The devil will find work for idle hands. If you're stuck thinking about it too much, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm. I always tell people try to solve problems that have solutions.
Yes.
If you're trying to think your way out of something that has no solutions, then good luck.
It's really not going to work.
Then you let the devil in. You go down the devil's highway.
Yeah.
So,
but this is kind of the theme, I think, of this conversation is like you start by having the conversation, by fronting up. This is an issue. You know what? I was laughing when you were saying it because my first sales manager was an absolute genius, like 25, 30 years ago, probably nearly 30 years ago. But he was just like, so after a week, like he just let me die basically for a week or 2 weeks. And I went to him and said, look, I clearly can't do this. I'm awful at this. And he's like, well, why is that then? I was just like, I've got no idea how to do it. Do you know what I mean? Like the secretaries won't let me through. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I've got no clue. And he's like, oh, who knows then how to get through? Or who knows what you have to say to get through? I'm like, well, I don't know. He's like, well, maybe it's the secretaries. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, ask them, say to them, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Exactly like you said, I don't know what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? I'm brand new at this and I'm supposed to speak to somebody in your company about this thing, blah, 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 blah. But I spend all my day talking to people like you. Do you know what I mean? And then you pitch the secretary, like, now you're my friend. Like, you might let me through. Do you know what I mean? And then once I got through to the secretaries, I was selling advertising. And I went back to him another 2 weeks later. I'm like, look, I obviously can't do this. I'm speaking to people. No one wants to buy anything. And he said to me, why didn't you sell them the media pack? Because they're free. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And then for the next 2 weeks, I'm doing that. You know, he was an absolute genius. I want to talk to him on here, but he's not in the business of like sales and marketing like we are. So it's proving to be a bit of a mission. The point is, he was a genius. And what you're saying is true. But that's when, like, everyone on our table was phoning up, and everyone they were speaking to was their mates. I mean, so the way it was working in publishing, it was magazine publishing at that time, is like you try and sell all week, and then on the last day when it's closing, you phone up your mates and say, look, I've got a deal, I've got a deal, I've got a deal. That's the way we did it. We used to call them chavs. But they were best mates with those people. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, yeah. So that's where I learned about relationship selling. There was a point to that, which was, it's not what you think it is. Like 100% of like basically everything I teach people in sales and marketing is exactly the opposite to what they think it is, and exactly the opposite to what most people are teaching them. Because what I'm telling them is way less scary than what they're being told from these other people, So I think fear is the problem. It absolutely is the problem. But I think actually fear of success might be a real thing. But I remember when I was told to ask open questions, it's like, I can't ask an open question. I won't even know what they're going to say. Well, what they're going to say is useful to me. Do you know what I mean? Because what they're going to say is about their situation and what they need. But I was petrified. It's like what are they going to say? This is how I speak when I do public speaking. Because I'm nosy, I've got like 40 questions in my head. So like you, I don't have notes. I might have a slide on the wall with a few bullet points, but I'm talking about something I'm interested in, something I'm passionate about, and I've got a head full of questions. So if I run out of steam, I'll just ask them a question, So it's the opposite to what people think it is. So what's your recommendation then? If people need to break some fear, what is it that they need to do? Where do they start?
They need to make a list, like I said, of what is terrifying them more than anything else, right? What are they in fear of? Some people get it confused based on, worry, anxiety, what's holding you back. It's all the same thing. It's fear. So just write down exactly that, maybe the top 3 things that you fear more than anything else, and those are your top 3 goals. And like I said, the other list is what are the other things that are holding you back, that are mind consuming yourself in a way that's either creating anxiety, depression, panic attacks, whatever it may be. Make a list and then identify what you don't have control over. And everything is a practice. There is no graduation in this thing called life. Just because I've done certain things to start a company or sell a company, or I've written books and spoken all over, that doesn't mean I don't get hammered with fear, but I have to identify it just like anybody else, but I got a great book out there. It's called The Power of Breaking Fear. I don't really try to solicit it's a great book, but I'll give you an example. I have resellers that sell it for a higher price. I don't even get credit for it. So that's a whole nother thing I need to work out. But my point is, if somebody really wants to take a step, pick that book up, pick it up on Audible or purchase it off of Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart. It's all over the place. I highly suggest. That is not just because I wrote it. I can't tell you how many people have told me their life has changed forever from reading that book. And that's my, quote unquote destiny, or to give back. It's not always about the money. There's a lot of stuff I do. I don't get paid for it. It is what it is. I don't have a problem with it, because my whole, persona or way in life right now is I'd like to be that person that makes the difference, without it being, let me have this, let me have that. I'm not saying that, for me, yeah. I mean, I used to charge a lot of money to speak for 30 minutes. And maybe I will, maybe I won't. But at the end of the day, the more you give, the more you get back. That's my point. So if you're stuck in fear right now, give more, expect less. Massive action. Write down what you control and what you don't have control. Those are your goals. And if you want to pick up the book, The Power of Breaking Fear, I highly suggest it, or the Audible. And if anybody wants to connect with me, they can look up Tim S. Marshall on LinkedIn and send me a message.
Super cool. Good. I think that's very often, like, I ask that question, but obviously I'm speaking to experts about the thing, so they have to say at some point, speak to me. So that's perfectly cool. And it brings us very nicely to question number 4, which is, I will, if you send me all the links, I'll put the links to your books in the description, goes on the website, so I can link to those things. If you send me the links, I can do that. Question number 4, what should people read other than, obviously, your great books?
Here's what I would say. Read something that pertains to your profession or where your head is at currently. So the thing about it is, I've read a lot of books, and I'm sure you have. And there's certain books that are written and there might be 300 pages, but there's only 5 takeaways. So when you read, do your research on, number 1, the evidence, who wrote it, is there takeaways in that? Because a lot of times we can get caught up in reading all these different things, but if there's not nuggets in it, a lot of nuggets, that's why I like the fear book I wrote. It's just all takeaways. But yeah, read something that is based on solving your problem now. I would say read it in the morning. Read it out loud. Why would I say that? If you're in business, communication, messaging, even being a speaker, you want to use your voice in a way where you have the ability to pull people in, because that's increasing your probabilities once again. So you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Number 1, you're reading, and number 2, you're reading out loud. And once you read out loud, practice saying and pronunciating each and every word the right way. And you can use voice inflection. It's a great way to build up your skills as a leader, executive, manager, president, salesperson, whatever it may be.
Cool. When was the last time you read something and you thought, that when you finished reading, you thought, okay, this is going to make a big difference to my life?
Actually, believe it or not, I'm reading a book right now. Let me look it up. And I haven't finished it by any means, but I think it's pertainable to where I'm at. And it is called, hold on one second, Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life.
Okay.
Finding in the Second Half of Life. And what I've found is, because I'm part of this group now, that there's a number of people that are talking more about hitting a certain age, or their kids are getting a little bit older, and how they're trying to they're struggling right now to reinvent themselves or find a new purpose. And I think that's a massive problem that's not spoken about. And you could be in your 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever age it is. But I think there's a lot of people that go through that. I know I've run through the gamut of, let me achieve this, let me achieve that. And then I'm like, okay, I've done all that. Now what?
Yeah.
What's next? So I've had to look at myself and say, what's my new purpose?
Cool. And I think that, when we get to our time of life, we have to find another purpose, I think. And I think you're right. It's not about money. I think there'll be some real poetic justice if I can get YouTube to pay me some money for these things. But, there's a mission, I think, that's more important. Okay, cool. How have you enjoyed this experience?
You know what? I will tell you this. I've been through a lot of interviews, and I've really found this enjoyable.
So I kind of joke about people who will endure a conversation or enjoy a conversation.
This has been nice. I mean, it's been like, I'm not just saying it because you're on point.
Cool. Excellent. All right. So the good news is that this is how I ask for referrals. I get you to say you've enjoyed it, and then you won't mind throwing people under the bus. So most people are able to introduce me to two people and say something interesting about those people right now. So who do you think my audience might benefit from hearing from, or who might enjoy to have a conversation with me? Have you got a couple of people you can introduce me to?
Sure. Absolutely.
Thank you, because that was a closed question. Two salespeople shouldn't be asking closed questions like that. So let me open that question up. Who, Tim S. Marshall, are you going to introduce me to who might enjoy at least, or maybe even enjoy to have a conversation like this with me?
Oh, there's a gentleman named Frank King. He's done six TED Talks. He's written for Jay Leno for over 20 years, or Night, whatever that show is called. I think it's Jay Leno. That's one person. And he was actually somebody that I was working with to do a TED Talk. And on my end, I'm guilty of procrastinating because I got caught up with some other stuff. But he's really good. And then I would say,
what does he talk about?
Believe it or not, he talks about suicide.
Oh, wow.
He is a ex-comedian. And, he's had these thoughts of suicide and came close to it. And now he gets hired around the country, I suppose around the world, to talk about it because it's, in certain industries, it's more relevant than others. There's a lot of statistics out there.
Yes.
And yeah, so he talks about that, but he's down to earth. He's a business guy. He's really smart, great communicator, great man. And then I would say, the other person would be Mary Gardner. And she's been on Nightline, ABC, Dateline. She's an executive coach. It's been in the media for a long time.
Okay, super cool. And so the way it works best is if you can drop me like a LinkedIn introduction or an email introduction or something like that, then I will pick it up from there exactly the way I did when John introduced me to you. But they sound like two extraordinarily interesting conversations. If you can support me to make those happen, I'll be really excited about that. What we'll do now is we'll say goodbye for anyone who's still with us, but then we'll stop recording. We'll say goodbye like normal human beings. But I just want to say, this is going on. It's international already. I've spoken to a lot of people from the UK. I've spoken to a lot of people in Australia and in other parts of the world. I'm only now just starting to get into kind of the US. And it's interesting because I think you have quite a different reputation in your attitudes to sales and marketing than we have in the UK. Um, so what's the word? The word's fearful. I'm a little bit fearful about speaking to you guys because like maybe we'll have very different attitudes. You and I clearly don't. So yeah, I'm hoping I'll discover more of this in America. That's what I'm hoping. Yeah, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was good. Good communication back and forth.
Excellent.